right, now in the top 5 of our top 10 receivers heading into college football next season. And at number 5, Dalton, is Tre Harris out of Ole Miss. What do you love the most about Tre Harris?
I love the way he gets downfield, man. You're talking about a 99.9 deep grade, a 98.9 intermediate grade, 6th in the country in receiving grade, 10th in the country in yards per route run. Look, he doesn't get the target share that he probably should because Lane Kiffin, first and foremost, wants to run the ball. If he can win the game running the ball every play, he probably would, honestly. But Tre Harris has to be his number one guy this year. You know, you lose Zachary Franklin. You know, the receiving depth wasn't as good last year as they thought it would be. But Tre Harris is that guy downfield for them in an offense that throws deep and outside the numbers more than almost any team in the country, especially off play action. Tre Harris is the guy who has to make those big plays. And I just think he needs a bigger target share in order to show everything he can do. Big time size, maybe not elite speed, but good speed to get downfield. I think he's a classic vertical weapon in the same way that we've seen, you know, like even Tetsuo and McMillan can be. I think McMillan's a little more fluid than Harris is, but I think Harris can do everything that Ole Miss needs him to do in this offense, and I just think he needs to be featured more. I'm being honest with you. He's just not near the top tier in targets last year among, when you look at the elite receivers in the country, like Odunze and Neighbors and those guys. Like, just Kiffin has to use him more. I know he wants to lean on the run game and play action, but we've talked before about Jackson Dart needing to be better in just true drop back situations. I think a big part of that is like, man, just find Tre Harris and give him a shot, because I think to me, especially on a vertical tree, I think he can do things vertically as well as any receiver in the country.
Yeah, so he actually transferred in from Louisiana Tech, and usually when you see a guy go from a Group of 5 level to the SEC, usually you see them, drop in production. He actually improved, man. He had an 80.5 receiving grade in 2022 at Louisiana Tech, and he had an 89.6, over 9 points higher than what he showed at Louisiana Tech the year before. Also tied for 6th among all receivers in the country this past season with 89.6 receiving grade, 3.17 yards per route run, which was 9th among all receivers in the country as well. He can make some absolutely ridiculous catches. He had a couple against Texas A&M that you see in that game right there. I think like a couple one-handers almost in a row that he had against Texas A&M, and he could really, really show that off. And difficult player to tackle too at 6'2", 205 pounds. So certainly capable of making some highlight reel plays. Tre Harris is, and certainly, in my opinion, right now, the clear number 2 receiver in the SEC behind a guy we'll get into much later on this list. What are some of the negatives, though, Dalton, that you see with Tre Harris?
I think the big thing, if you're going to be a vertical receiver, you're going to be a size kind of receiver, you've got to make contested catches. And he's shown flashes of it. He made 4 out of 5 against Texas A&M when he absolutely dominated them. But for the season, just 10 for 28 on contested targets. So, look, it's hard when you're talking about deep and outside the numbers. They're the hardest passes to complete anyway, right? But I think he just needs to get up and fight for the football a little bit better, right? If you got up to 15 or 16 out of 28, that would be big time for him. You're talking about getting in that area with guys like Rome Odunze. It's what made him great, even though he was a more vertical receiver, is winning those 50-50 balls more often than 50-50, right? It doesn't have to. I'm not going to say it's going to be 80 or 90%, but if you can get up in that 60 range, then you're talking. But 10 for 28, not quite good enough for a guy of Harris's size and skill. So I think it just needs to be a greater emphasis on just giving him a chance to win, and he's got to get up in the air and win it, because they're going to run up against teams like, Alabama, the Alabamas and the Georgias of the world, where they're just going to have to will their way to win somehow. It's the biggest flaw, really. It's the biggest theme with Ole Miss as a whole. They can beat everybody except for, like, those top 6 or 7 schools, right? And I think it showed me a lot when they beat Penn State in the bowl game. Sorry.
No, you don't
but
do this.
That's an elite defense that they went, as between Kiffin's play calling and everything else, that they went and shredded. They're going to be able to run the ball. They're going to be able to run their play action stuff. But Harris in one-on-one situations has to come away with 3 or 4 tough catches if they're going to beat the elite teams and get in the top 12 and be a playoff contender.
Yeah, you mentioned the contested targets, man. 24th percentile with a 36% contested catch rate last year, which is just not something you want to see out of a guy who's that's kind of his game, is going up and getting it and being a bigger receiver and doing that. My biggest negative, though, Dalton, for him, he was in the 0th percentile in terms of separation rate against single coverage at about 29%. So he was only open on 29% of his targets against single coverage, like I said, is in the 0th percentile. Overall, 49th percentile in overall separation rate as well at 54%. He's really, really good against zone coverage and finding holes in zone coverage, but against single coverage, man, he really does struggle getting separation. I think a lot of that's to do with him just being a good, not great athlete right now. He texted out he scored as a basically 70th percentile athlete in our GAS metric, which is your game athleticism score metric that can measure your speed and how well you move and your change direction ability and all that. So I think he's kind of a okay athlete. And as a route runner, there's still a lot to work on with Tre Harris right now. So getting better as a route runner, getting better at contested catch situations, I think that'll probably take his game to the next level right now. But Tre Harris still enough to be a top 5 receiver on our list heading into the 2024 season.